All right, we're here at SEC Media Days. Keenan Womack, Texas Sports Unfiltered. A lot of you damn Texas guys made your way to Dallas.
We did. This is my hometown, but I do live in Austin, covering Texas and some other stuff. But yeah, I'm from here, so it's kind of a little homecoming for me. Very much love coming back home, you know.
Now, why do you call it Unfiltered? Is it... Can you give us a sample? You can say anything you want on here.
We don't pull punches, man. We are very honest. If I don't think Texas is going to win the SEC, I'm going to say it. And I have been on record saying maybe not this year. I like the future a lot. I just think replacing those defensive linemen is going to be a huge deal. And I think that's going to be, I think the biggest test is actually going to be to see where they're at is going to be before conference play against Michigan, because you know Michigan's going to run the ball 30 times. And you're going to know exactly what that defensive line looks like, how Alfred Collins reacts, you know, how Baron Sorrell reacts. It's going to be very interesting to see how the defensive line unit, because I like the edges more now. I think the edge unit has improved, but you lose an Outland Trophy winner, you lose a first-round draft pick, both defensive linemen. There's going to be some attrition regardless. Even if you can replace that on aggregate, sort of, you're going to get probably 70% of that at best, because that was one of the best defensive lines Texas has ever had and probably the strength of their team last year.
Let me ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, most likability here at SEC Mike, has Texas got Mike at a 1 or a 10 being like they love him, they can't get enough of him?
I think people like Mike, man, because Mike tells it like it is, man. And that's what we do in Texas. We don't lie about stuff. We're too honest sometimes, and we get ourselves into trouble by just saying what we think and not really thinking about the consequences necessarily. So I think we like just big shooting, just whatever, man. You know, whatever goes,
now,
I guess.
I have noticed that. I can't remember who we had on the other day. It's like Texas is finally embracing the dark side. Instead of being the nice guy, trying to be polite and trying to play by the rules, it's like, hey, no, this is it. We have a lot of money, and we're gonna win some football games.
That's kind of the feeling. It's very much like a, you know, there's definitely a disconnect between how SEC fans feel and how Texas fans feel, because I think a lot of Texas fans are walking in thinking everybody's scared of us, and that's not true. It's not true. And Texas is great, and maybe halfway through the season people are more scared. But you have how many of the last national champions from this conference? You have Alabama, you have LSU, you have Georgia, you have these teams that have had much more success than Texas has over the last 15 years. And now Texas has been through 3 coaches. They had the Charlie Strong era, they had the Tom Herman era. And what was interesting about the Herman era was it started looking like he might be the guy, right? You beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. You have great games against Oklahoma. You have great bowl success. You win all your bowl games, but there's a standard to meet at UT for football, and it hasn't been met in a long time. And last year was kind of the first step in the right direction of, okay, maybe this thing can be a contender again.
That's good to know he watches Tennessee football, too.
That's where I went, UT.
No
I was
comment.
like, oh, I got to hear.
Oh, no. You're right. I stepped in it already. Texas, sorry. Sorry to our volunteer listeners. My apologies.
And let me teach you a lesson. You said that Sugar Bowl win over Georgia. But you're in the SEC now. When we lose a bowl game, we didn't really want to be there. So you got to get with that.
Guys opted out. It doesn't count. You know, I remember after Georgia beat Baylor, I think, the next year, and there were some opt-outs, and there was a bunch of jokes like, oh, Baylor had a bunch of guys opt out. It's like, no, that doesn't count. You got to take your licks, man. Take your licks, you know? Yeah.
Where do you think Texas will rank for the rest of the SEC? We're kind of curious. The home field advantage in Austin, is it, you think it'll be one of the best, or is it still kind of getting there?
It depends, man. It's definitely improved a lot. Like, the loudest environment I've ever been in was LSU, Alabama in 2012. I was there for that game in Baton Rouge. That is the loudest place I've ever been in my entire life. I couldn't hear after I left, and I had a damn blast, let me tell you. Texas really has upped their game. The thing with Texas fans at the stadium is those tickets aren't cheap. So you have some of your wine and cheese crowd, right? But you also have fans that show out when they're good. And last year, 2 years ago, when they took on Alabama at home and lost that close game, I was there. That is the loudest I have ever heard DKR. That place was rocking. And they almost pulled off an upset against a much better team. Like, let's be real.
A lot of penalties.
Yeah, you could say that. I'm not going to say they got robbed, but there was some questionable stuff that happened. I think Alabama was the better team, but Texas played a hell of a game that day. That defense showed out. And from that point on, I kind of figured...
Did you say they didn't get robbed?
They
got robbed.
I don't like to say that because then people are going to think I'm biased.
Don't have to apologize.
Okay, yeah, they got robbed. That was a safety. Let's be real. Bryce Young was down. His arm was down. It was a safety. Let's be real. But no, I mean, the Texas crowd it's gotten a lot better. I think with Sark in charge, people believe in the program again. There were some dark times, man. When I was a student at the University of Texas, they were terrible. I mean, weren't making bowl games bad. I mean, getting blown out. The worst game I can recall, man, my junior year of college, and I was miserable. I didn't even go to this game. I was so just fed up. They were down 28-0 in the first quarter against Texas Christian. And you flip that to now, and they beat Alabama on the road.
Yeah.
The transformation over 10 years has been astounding to me, and I know that's a long time, but after year after year after year of disappointment, year after year of bringing in a top class, they don't do anything. They just don't get developed. The offensive line doesn't work, because like in the Herman era, they were able to recruit skill positions pretty well. The problem was they were not physical at the line of attack. They were not getting pushes off from the offensive line. And you look at what they've done. I always use the example of Christian Jones, right? Christian Jones is a guy who really struggled at the tackle spot. And they bring in Kyle Flood, and the dude's in the NFL now. And that is just never a thing I thought I would say, that Christian Jones would be an NFL player. It speaks to his work ethic, of course, but it also speaks to the development. And that's the key. You get these 5 stars. They're not just going to be 5 stars on the field automatically. Not all of them. You have to develop these guys. And I think the offensive line play offensive and defensive line play are the primary reasons Texas was successful last year. I think it opened up everything on them for offense. They were able to run the ball with Jonathan Brooks. Now you have Cedric Baxter this year, Jaden Blue this year. Really fun 1-2 combo at running back. And Kelvin Banks Jr. is anchoring this offensive line, and Kelvin Banks Jr. could be a top 10 pick this year, and I think he's mocked very highly. He was a very highly thought of player coming out of high school, 4 or 5 star, depending on your recruiting side of choice. And there's just a lot of talent on this offensive line. I'm really excited to see how they block and how they deal with a very physical conference in the SEC.
Now, I went to Norman July 1st, and it wowed me. And I love the Sooners now, great fans. They treated me great. I have a feeling they probably treated you and your fan base a little differently. So maybe can you teach us something about Oklahoma fans that maybe see the other side of Oklahoma fans that the rest of the SEC will probably soon meet?
I'll give you 2 real quick stories. The first was Texas lost to Oklahoma in 2021 in the most heartbreaking loss I've ever witnessed in person. My wife, my beautiful, gorgeous wife, and I were very upset, not having a good time, and an Oklahoma fan walked up and threw the horns down in my wife's face. Like, horns effing down. And I was like, are we going to have to fight? Like, do I have to fight you now? And then we got them back, with the 49-0 game, and they had just debuted these new Oklahoma shirts. It's just a big O. It kind of looks like the Ohio State logo. And one of my best friends, I was walking around with him, friend Garrett, and he was pointing. He had a few drinks. Let's be real. It's the Red River Shootout. You have a few drinks, and he was walking around and pointing at those O shirts and going, "How did you know how many points you were going to score? How did you predict how many points you were going to score today?" So that's just a little taste of what that rivalry looks like. It's very cheeky, it's very aggressive, but man, there is nothing like the Red River Shootout, and it's the Red River Shootout. Let's not get it twisted.
Yeah. Well, that on that note, so if you're coming in for that game, what is that whole? Can you kind of just go through that week, that whole process there?
Oh man, so it is, in my opinion, the coolest rivalry. Obviously, there are great rivalries across the SEC. You have the Iron Bowl, of course. You have Alabama, LSU. You have Florida, Georgia. There's so many, Florida, Tennessee. So many great rivalries. There's nothing like showing up at that state fair, man. Sark was just talking about it. The corn dogs. Half the people are in burnt orange. Half the people are in crimson and white. And you get into that stadium, and it's split 50-50 down the middle. And if it's a blowout, half the stadium's gone, and you're just having a party, man. There's a great video I got on Instagram a couple of years ago when Texas just demolished Oklahoma. It was just a shot of all the Texas fans, and then they kind of zoom over, and it's just an empty half of the stadium. So you really get to flex on your opponent when you win that game, because half the people there are opposing fans. You know, it's really fun. It's a really fun environment, man. It's one of the best in college football. It really is.
Well, speaking of rivalry, is A&M just your little brother?
Try to get me in trouble, man. I wouldn't say little brother. I would say maybe a little bit. No, I just got done talking to Billy Lucci, man. He's a great guy. I am so beyond excited for this rivalry to start. And you talk about the recent exchange of coaches between Texas and Texas A&M, with Jim Schlossnagle leaving A&M, opting for Texas, and then Michael Early flipping back from Texas back to A&M. That's only going to add fuel to the fire to this rivalry. This game in College Station in late November is going to be a movie. It's going to be epic. And I think Texas wins that game. I think Texas is better this year, but look how Elko is recruiting. Look what he's doing in California. Look what he's doing out of the state. He is crushing defensive recruiting out there. It's going to be really interesting to see the program he can build. And I think I'll just say it, I think he is more dedicated than the previous head coach. I think he cares more about development. I don't think he's resting on his laurels, and I think he can really turn them into a contender. And all the Texas fans listening probably hate me. They're like, you traitor. I'm just speaking it like it is. I think they have a pretty bright future.
Who's under more pressure in that game? Texas, with all the hype, expectations, should be a playoff team according to most people here, or A&M, who gets to host the game, who, you know, it's going to mean the world. Fair or not, a lot of people are saying, well, if they go 8-4, but they beat Texas, it's a good year. So who's under more pressure there, do you think, to win just that one game?
It's got to be Texas, man. With the expectations for the season, it's going to be an upset if A&M wins that game, unless the season's completely flip and something I don't foresee happening happens. It's got to be Texas under pressure there. You know, they consider themselves the big brother, and they have to win that game. You come back into that game, and I've been a part of that game on the losing side. It sucks to lose that game, man. You're miserable for a few weeks, and all your A&M coworkers are walking in going, gig 'em, you know, and you're just sitting there at your desk like, what the hell am I doing here? That is going to be quite the game. I'm just so excited that it's back. It's a part of college football that's been missing for so long. A little piece of my heart got taken out when that game stopped being a thing. And, you know, you watch the rivalry this year in baseball. They played each other in baseball. Now, A&M was much better this year, but the passion is there still. The fire has been stoked again. This thing is going to be epic.
Well, I'm right there with you, but one of the things I'm hearing a lot is optimism. And sometimes with that comes lofty expectations, and I mean, we just had Nick Saban not too long ago say, yeah, I think Texas is going to be playing for an SEC championship, you know, which is great, but if you drop a game or two early in the season, then all of a sudden those expectations come back to haunt you. So I'm looking at that week 2 matchup between Michigan and me and Mike think Texas should beat the shit out of them, but last year, I thought you would beat the shit out of Houston. You know,
yeah.
Is there a little bit of reserve maybe with this team coming into this season that, hey, man, if we're not buttoned up, you know, there's a couple of games I'm really worried about.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby Smart put it perfectly, man. You were a week away from humility.
Yeah.
Right? You don't show up. And I'm not even just talking about Michigan, because I think they'll beat Michigan too, but I think it's going to be a grind of a game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout at all. I think it's very much going to be a drag out. It's going to be like a tank fight. You know what I mean? like a Shakur Stevenson fight or something. Hopefully more entertaining than that. But yeah, it's going to be a war, and I think that is really good for them early in the season. If you'll remember all the way back to 2005. Texas' last national championship win over Southern Cal, they had a game early in the season. It was their second game of the season, too, is at Ohio State, right? So that game primed them for the season. You watched them when they beat Alabama last year, they were primed until they ran into OU. And then you watched OU beat Texas, and then OU struggles against South Florida. They lose a game after that. Yeah. It's all about keeping your wits about you and not getting cocky. And I think Sark is doing a good job of preparing this team for every week's going to be a war. Florida's not at the top of their game. That's going to be a war.
Yeah.
Mississippi State, Jeff Lebby's a great offensive coach, and I asked him today real quick about what the difference is between maybe the old SEC and the new SEC, right? You think of the SEC typically, and it's this just big defensive ends and tackles, and you're just trying to run the ball, and it's 24-17 is your high score of the week. That's changed, though. Think about 2019 LSU with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and you have these explosive offenses, the Devontae Smith, Mac Jones offense at Alabama. And I'm just really curious to see what this league is going to look like over the next 5 years. Is it going to continue to trend towards the quarterback-heavy, throwing the ball around 400-yard games? Or is it going to kind of settle back into big defenses, locking people down? I'm really curious to see which side of that Texas falls on, because obviously Sark is an offensive guy, but their defense was great last year. That defensive line was elite, and they had so much talent, and I'm just really interested to see how they handle, is it going to be an offensive league? Is it going to be a defensive league? Is it going to be both? Like, what will it be in 5 years? That's always been interesting to me.
Well, obviously, Oklahoma's a key rival, and A&M, whether people want to say it's a rivalry. I mean,
it's
come on.
A rivalry.
Yeah, it's a great rivalry.
It's a rivalry for sure. Yeah.
But if there's one other SEC program that you think Texas will develop a rivalry with when they're new opponents, who do you think is most likely to be that? And even if it's not annual, still, like Georgia and Alabama, they typically don't play annually, but that's probably maybe the best rivalry in the conference the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think if Arkansas improves, it'll definitely be them. I know Arkansas hates Texas. That's an established fact. That goes back to the Southwest Conference days. I mean, if you watched that game 3 years ago in Sark's first season, those dudes were lit. Those dudes were lit, man. They were having the time of their lives. I remember the announcer saying, "These fans hate Texas more than they love themselves." So, yeah, I mean, Arkansas is going to be rivalry. I truly think LSU is going to be a team they develop a real tough rivalry with, because I always say this about LSU every year: you can't count them out ever. They always have talent. They always have somebody. They have a Harold Perkins on the defensive end. Hopefully he plays in the right position this year. I like watching him rush the passer. That's what I like to watch Harold Perkins do. I think LSU-Texas, Texas-LSU is going to be a real rivalry. I think that's going to be a battle of programs that are trying to compete for national championships, and I think that's going to be a game. It's about 8 hours between Austin and Baton Rouge. I've done the drive a couple of times, and I just think those cultures, it's a big party culture in Austin, big party culture in Baton Rouge. Everybody likes to have a good time in those games, and I just think that's going to become a rivalry that's going to be really, really fun.
No, I'm pumped up for it. Because I do think of the games. I think of the last time they played LSU. That was a freaking awesome game.
I was at that game. It was a blast, dude.
Yeah.
Shout out the LSU fans behind me. They were looking down at the Palm girls, and one of them said, "Man, those chaps are a good look." That's an inside joke between me and my wife.
I'm just glad I don't have to retire all my Matthew McConaughey memes,
All right. Yeah, of course, man. He's like the president of Austin at this point, the CEO of the Longhorns.
Does anybody ever get mad that he's on the sidelines?
No, because he's like one of the few guys who's an actor who doesn't seem like completely up their own ASS. He just seems like a guy that
just enjoying the game.
Yeah, he's having a good time. He's
not like Jerry
with his
Jones
family. Don't get me started on the Cowboys. I was having a good day, and now you're gonna get me started on the Cowboys? Come on now. No, I as a Dallas guy, we don't need to get into that. But yeah, I think McConaughey is a good representation of the Keep Austin Weird faction. Just the kind of hell yeah, man.
My last thing for you, I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
They're pretty proud of the football down here in Texas, but is the football better or is the barbecue better?
Oh man, You're gonna make me ask. How about this? Next time you're in Austin, we're gonna go to the top 3 barbecue places in Austin. I'll let you decide. Love Barbecue, Franklin's, and the third's pretty debatable, but those are my top 2. Love Barbecue and Franklin's are just amazing. Laurel's great. You can go out to Lockhart. You can go out to little towns outside. Have some of the best barbecue you've ever had. That's what's funny. You can go to just a little shack and you'll eat. You'll pay $10 and you'll get 3 pounds of brisket, and you'll eat the whole thing and be like, I need to nap for 6 weeks. I need to go hibernate. That's where I need to go.
I'm still hungover from Terry Black's.
Terry Black's is great too,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, there's so many great joints in Austin. I'm truly blessed to live there. I love living there, and I love covering the Longhorns.
How are you not my size?
Because I very carefully decide when to eat barbecue. Or
And
else
it's
I
1,000
cannot handle
degrees
it.
outside.
It's really hot. It's very hot.
All right, before you go, Keenan, can you tell the audience how can they follow you? How can they find your work?
Yeah, so I'm Keenan Womack, at Keenan Womack on Twitter. I work for Texas Sports Unfiltered, covering the Longhorns with my man Eric Henry. I have a show noon to 1 every day. I do some writing. I write for Sports Illustrated, covering the NBA draft. So I got a lot of different beats, but nothing like college football, man.
Yeah.
Just nothing like it, and nothing like the dang SEC, man.
Come on.
Nothing like it.
All right,
Thank
great.
you, brother.